Once he disappeared, billions of people around the world were shocked. What happened to Amelia? What happened to our heroine? Ever since then, that mystery has haunted people.
It was very interesting to me to fly in southern waters rather than in the north.
Our goal is to go and inspect an object that we see in satellite imagery in the lagoon of Nikumaroro Island. We think this object is very likely to be what remains of the airplane that was flown to the island by Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan.
The Taraia Object, visible in imagery of Nikumaroro Island's lagoon, matches the exact dimensions of Amelia Earhart's Lockheed Electra. The object has been in the same location since 1938, just months after Earhart vanished on July 2, 1937. And a Purdue University expedition departing November 2025 will finally determine if this is the smoking gun that closes an 88-year-old case. Tropical Cyclone Pam tore through the South Pacific in March 2015, one of the most destructive storms ever recorded in the region. The cyclone generated a massive storm surge that approached Nikumaroro Island from the west, rushing into the lagoon with devastating force. But instead of burying everything under sediment, the surge swept sediment away. When the waters receded, satellite imagery captured something that hadn't been visible before. An object in the lagoon, plane-shaped, sitting in shallow water where nothing should be. Michael Ashmore spotted it first in 2020 while analyzing satellite data. The Archaeological Legacy Institute searched historical imagery and found the object in 26 different satellite images going back decades. The breakthrough came when researchers examined aerial photographs from 1938. There it was, the same object in the same location, just months after Earhart disappeared while attempting to become the first woman to fly around the world at the equator. For 77 years, this object sat covered by sediment, invisible from above. Then Cyclone Pam exposed it. The object measures approximately 11 meters long, matching the fuselage length of a Lockheed Electra 10E. The shape corresponds to an aircraft with wings separated from the main body, consistent with a crash landing where impact would shear wings from the fuselage. The location sits directly east of Todman Passage, the natural channel connecting the lagoon to the open ocean. The Taraia Object's location corresponds precisely with radio direction findings recorded in July 1937. Multiple stations detected transmissions on Earhart's known frequencies in the days following her disappearance. The U.S. Navy, U.S. Coast Guard, and Pan American World Airways all recorded bearings that converge on one point: Nikumaroro. The most compelling evidence came from Nauru Island, where a radio operator reported hearing voice transmissions on 6210 kHz at 3 specific times on July 2nd. The operator described them as similar to voices heard from Earhart's plane the previous night, but without engine noise in the background. This suggested the aircraft was no longer airborne. Researchers at Nauticus undertook a restoration project in 2020, rebuilding the exact radio equipment Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan carried aboard their final flight. The Western Electric 13C aircraft transmitter and Bendix model RA-1A receiver. Through extensive testing, researchers discovered crucial details about the aircraft's radio capabilities that previous investigations had overlooked. Damage to the aircraft's antenna system during a March 1937 ground loop accident at Luke Field significantly reduced radiated power on higher frequencies, dropping it to approximately half a watt on 3105 kHz. This antenna damage explains why Earhart's final transmissions were so weak, why direction finding failed, why rescue vessels couldn't locate her despite being within radio range. Earhart's last confirmed transmission to the Coast Guard cutter Itasca came at 8:43 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, when she reported circling but being unable to locate Howland Island with dangerously low fuel supplies. The restored equipment helped researchers understand why communication failed, primarily due to frequency mismatches and antenna limitations that prevented effective direction finding. Human bones discovered on Nikumaroro in 1940 by British colonial officer Gerald Gallagher were initially dismissed as male remains by Dr. D.W. Hoodless using 1940s forensic methods. In 2018, Dr. Richard Jantz from the University of Tennessee conducted a revolutionary reanalysis using modern forensic anthropology software called Fordisk. Working with limited metric data that survived in historical records, Johns compared the Nikumaroro bones to estimates of Earhart's bone structure derived from photographs, clothing measurements, and official documents. The results proved extraordinary. Jantz's analysis revealed that Earhart's estimated bone structure matched the Nikumaroro remains better than 99% of individuals in a large reference sample. The forensic analysis also revealed the remains belonged to a taller-than-average woman of European descent, matching Earhart's physical characteristics precisely. The bones disappeared after the initial examination, lost somewhere in the Fijian medical system. But the measurements survived in colonial records, preserved well enough for modern forensic software to provide the strongest physical evidence yet that Earhart reached Nikumaroro and died there. In October 1937, just 3 months after Earhart disappeared, British colonial officer Eric Bevington visited Nikumaroro to assess the island's suitability for settlement. Among his 253 photographs was one image containing what appears to be aircraft debris on the reef. The object measures no longer than a grain of sand in the original print. Yet, detailed analysis by photo experts suggests it shows components consistent with a Lockheed Electra landing gear assembly. Jeff Glickman, a photo analyst who discovered the anomaly, determined its precise location by triangulating features visible in both the 1937 photograph and modern satellite images. Photo analysts identified specific components that match the size, shape, and configuration of Electra landing gear parts. The probability of an unknown object randomly possessing all these characteristics was described as vanishingly small. The Bevington object sits on the reef just offshore from where the Taraia Object rests in the lagoon. The positioning suggests a crash landing scenario where the aircraft struck the reef at low tide, shearing the landing gear, then settled into the lagoon as the tide rose. Physical evidence accumulated over decades paints a picture of temporary survival. Artifacts recovered from Nikumaroro include a woman's shoe from the 1930s matching Earhart's size, a compact case, freckle cream jar, and medicine vial. The shoe particularly intrigues researchers. Cat's paw brand, size 9, women's style from the 1930s. Photographs show Earhart wearing similar shoes. The shoe was found near the site where the bones were discovered. The freckle cream raises eyebrows. Earhart was known to be self-conscious about her freckles and used specialized creams. The jar found on Nikumaroro contained a formula popular in the 1930s. Skeptics argue anyone could have owned such items, but the concentration of 1930s American artifacts on an uninhabited Pacific island in 1940 defies random chance. Improvised tools suggest someone attempted to survive using available resources. An aluminum panel with rivet patterns matching Electra specifications, an oddly cut piece of clear plexiglass, materials that could only have come from an aircraft. In 2017, 4 forensic dogs and archaeologists visited Nikumaroro. The dogs indicated they detected the scent of human remains in specific locations. Their alerts corresponded to areas where colonial records indicated the 1940 bones were originally found. Nikumaroro sits approximately 400 miles southeast of Howland Island, Earhart's intended destination. When she transmitted her last message reporting she was circling but unable to locate Howland, fuel running critically low, she would have faced an immediate decision. Continue searching and risk running out of fuel over open ocean, or turn south toward the Phoenix Islands visible on her charts. The island offered something no other location provided: a large, flat reef exposed at low tide, perfect for an emergency landing. The SS Norwich City, a freighter that wrecked on Nikumaroro's reef in 1929, would have been clearly visible from the air. A massive steel ship sitting on the reef would have served as an unmistakable landmark. Earhart and Noonan, seeing the reef and the wrecked freighter, would have attempted a wheels-up landing on the flat coral surface. At low tide, the reef would have appeared solid enough. But if they landed during rising tide, the aircraft would have quickly been surrounded by water, eventually floating into the lagoon as the tide peaked. The location of the Taraia object corresponds to this scenario perfectly. Just inside the lagoon, east of the passage connecting to the ocean, in an area where an aircraft landing on the outer reef could have drifted as tides shifted. The Purdue University expedition departed October 30th, 2025 from the Amelia Earhart terminal at Purdue University Airport. The team flew to Majuro in the Marshall Islands, then departed November 4th by sea for the 200-mile journey to Nikumaroro. 5 days on site to investigate the Taraia object. The mission begins with documentation, video and still images before any disturbance. Aerial drone surveys mapping the lagoon floor. Remote sensing using magnetometers to detect metal and sonar to map underwater topography. Only after comprehensive non-invasive surveying will underwater excavation begin. The team will use hydraulic dredges to carefully remove sediment covering the object, exposing it layer by layer. If the object proves to be aircraft wreckage, each component will be photographed, measured, and cataloged. The goal: identify the aircraft definitively through serial numbers and component specifications. Stephen Schultz, Senior Vice President of Purdue University, will serve as field assistant. Earhart worked at Purdue from 1935 to 1937. The Purdue Research Foundation helped fund the Lockheed Electra she flew. She intended to return the aircraft to Purdue after completing her world flight. Schultz emphasized the significance. Based on the evidence, this expedition offers the best chance to solve perhaps the greatest mystery of the 20th century and fulfill Amelia's wishes to bring the Electra home. The expedition faces challenges. Nikumaroro's remoteness makes logistics difficult. Previous expeditions have found tantalizing evidence, but nothing conclusive. Rick Gillespie, Executive Director of the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, has conducted a dozen expeditions to Nikumaroro over 35 years. He agrees the island is likely where Earhart landed and died, but expresses skepticism about the Taraia object specifically. Gillespie believes the satellite imagery shows a coconut palm tree with root ball, but Pettigrew counters that Cyclone Pam in 2015 was extraordinary in its power and direction. Previous searches occurred before that storm. The satellite imagery clearly shows something matching aircraft dimensions that has been in the same location since 1938. Finding Earhart's aircraft would answer questions that have haunted aviation history for 88 years. What happened in those final hours? Did she and Noonan survive the landing? How long did they survive as castaways? The aircraft itself could provide answers. If the radio equipment survived, analysis might reveal whether Earhart attempted distress calls after landing. If navigation charts remained in the cockpit, they might show her intended course. For Purdue University, recovering the Electra would fulfill Earhart's original wishes and bring home an important piece of aviation history. For Earhart's family, closure. For aviation history, solving the mystery removes uncertainty about one of the field's most celebrated figures. The November 2025 expedition represents the best opportunity yet. Advanced technology, experienced researchers, clear targets based on satellite, imagery, and institutional support combine to create conditions no previous search has enjoyed. In just weeks, the team will begin excavation. Sediment will be carefully removed. The object will be exposed, and the world will learn whether this is finally the breakthrough that solves aviation's greatest mystery, or another dead end in a search that has consumed thousands of hours over nearly a century. The answer lies beneath a few feet of sand and coral in a remote Pacific lagoon. After 88 years of searching, the truth about what happened to Amelia Earhart might finally emerge from the waters of Nikumaroro. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.